I want my data. I'm even willing to pay for it. But then reality strikes and nobody wants to pay for it. Very few people are using it. It is complicated, your healthcare, so I can't blame them either. But, managing all that data is really hard. And so healthcare is moving from that fee-for-based sick care to value-based care, which is where doctors' health systems are incentivized on the overall health of the population. So that is slowly changing. But there's a lot of incumbent players in there, holding on to the way the world is today.
RJ, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Likewise. Maybe to get started, for anyone who doesn't know about your background and what you're working on, just give a quick snapshot and we can kind of dive into some particular topics.
Yeah, my name is RJ Kedziora. I'm co-founder of a digital health product development data analytics company. Founded back in 2003. Really focused on the idea of how do we use technology to improve patient care. If we look at just my personal background, it came up through the software development ranks over the years and into process management, project management, and those types of things, realizing very early on, well, technology is very important. It is much more about the people and the process and using those. As you are developing software, you're not developing it for yourself. You're developing it for that end user. And realizing that early on in my career has just helped propel a lot of things in life.
With the software development journey, it's always interesting to see where people fall on the spectrum, whether it's building one product and going deep, or like yourself, building a company that spans multiple clients, multiple products, and you can kind of go more broad. How did you determine which side of the coin was right for you?
I love solving problems. And so getting into the consulting game early on gave me that opportunity. Instead of focusing on just one product, as you said, and really going deep with that, over the years, I've gotten to focus on many products in many different areas, particularly with our focus on healthcare. I often joke I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV, but I get to talk to a lot of doctors, work with a lot of PhDs, developing solutions to help them deliver better patient care. Going back, it was probably 2010, I remember sitting in a room with a dozen endocrinologists, people who treat patients with diabetes. And we were trying to figure out how to implement an algorithm to improve how they recommend medications. And we had case studies. And those, if there was a dozen endocrinologists, doctors in the room, there was 15 opinions on how to treat a particular patient. So, they also turned to me and they're like, good luck. But, it was an interesting challenge to have of, okay, how do I take the brain power of all these really intelligent, smart people and turn it into technology that everybody can use? So it's that drive to solve the next challenge, the next problem is what's driven us in that direction.
I know you've been doing this for 20 years. So tell me if you have kind of the experience prior to then, or you can even, pull on experiences prior to being in the health tech space. But my question would be, when you're dealing with healthcare tech or health tech or medical technology, is there's kind of a different approach to the software development lifecycle versus just building an end consumer product or a fintech product or something where it's less regulated or it's not going to have as large implications on people's lives? And if so, just kind of highlight what the differences are between traditional software development versus software development in this particular sector.
Yeah, I did get my start in software development actually at US Steel, of all places. That was very, very interesting in working on tubular steel and testing of that. And I moved into accounting companies, railroad car scheduling systems, crazy things over the years. And healthcare has always had that sense of giving back, and developing software in healthcare is the same yet different. So you're obviously doing the same activities, you're using the same programming languages and stuff, but the impact to what you're developing can impact humans, their health, their wellness kind of thing. So you do have to be aware of that. as you're developing. Risk analysis, risk-based approaches to everything that we do is very important. We can't eliminate the risk of a negative impact. How can we mitigate that? And a lot of it is around process. We've been lucky in recruiting people over the years because there's a lot of interest in working with us because of that digital health and the idea that we're working for the greater good. But that transition from other industries into healthcare and what we do, we happen to be what's called ISO 13485 certified, which basically means we have a good, well-documented software development process. And it's not to say that people in other industries don't have those good processes. They do, but it's essential requirement of working in healthcare. As you're developing these solutions, you need to make sure that you're doing a good job, that they're well tested from that perspective. And you really have to look at that end user perspective. You're not developing for yourself. So part of our onboarding and continual process improvement in education of people that work for us is medical knowledge and training. Fortunately, a lot of really good institutions put out content and information out there that we can use. So if you're working on a project in diabetes, you're going to get an understanding of what it means to be a doctor or a nurse treating that patient with diabetes, or a person that has diabetes. What does it mean to experience that condition so that you can do a better job? But that's what in the healthcare, it has a bigger impact that you have to be aware of. We have PhDs on staff to help drive process improvement and testing. So as for the general consumer, if you're creating an application and you're putting it out there in the world, you can start doing A/B testing and stuff like that and throw it out to 10,000 users and stuff like that and see what happens. You can't do that to the same degree in healthcare, and that's probably where the biggest difference is. As we develop solutions, then they go into usually small pilot studies, smaller clinical trials. Does it make an improvement? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, how do we improve that? How do we make an advancement on that? And then even after you go through that small trial of 10, 15 patients, you want to scale it up to make sure it works for a larger, broader set of people. So over the years, we've been part of R01 studies, which is a 5-year study with a large population as we've developed.
Meaning you've built software that then is tested over 5 years before actually going to production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
To make sure that it actually is making an improvement in the lives of people. In this case, it was with diabetes. Yeah, that's probably the biggest difference. That testability that has to happen to make sure it does what you think it does. Think of drugs that are out there on the market kind of thing. The amount of effort that goes into testing and studying them. They go through animal trials and before they even get to humans. Is essentially the same thing. There is an area in digital health that's come around in the last few years, digital therapeutics. And the idea of digital therapeutics is that's equivalent of a medication. So where
elaborate, like what is a digital therapeutic?
Yeah, so think of the difference between supplements that you might just buy at over the counter and medications that are prescribed by a doctor. Supplements might have an impact. Not some research has been done, but it hasn't been proven conclusively. Where a medication has gone through rigorous testing, rigorous approval from the FDA, and is continually monitored. And that's the difference between a general digital health application. It's probably about 300,000 or so, depending on what count you see, digital health applications in the world. But there's only maybe 100, low hundreds in terms of digital therapeutic applications. They've gone through a much more rigorous testing process. They've been developed around the idea of the scientific evidence to prevent, treat, manage an actual disease. You see a lot of its use in mental health, anxiety management, anger management these days, where there's and the benefit is there's just not enough professionals out there to help all the people that need them. And so if we can drive and create these digital therapeutics, we're going to make a big difference in the world.
That's interesting. So it's basically software that has achieved a higher standard of actually being a tool, solution, whatever you want to call it, for a particular medical condition.
Mm-hmm.
What's the process to kind of get that status of digital therapeutic versus just, and I don't know if Headspace would kind of be considered a therapeutic or not, but like there are obviously apps out there that can help you with breathing or meditation, but they probably aren't meeting that rigorous standard of a digital therapeutic. So what's the difference between the two?
Yeah, those aren't particularly at that level, but there are digital therapeutic applications out there for treating like asthma and things like that that are doing well. And it's the threshold. It's the medical claims those manufacturers, the digital therapeutics, are putting out there and making. So again, you think of, when you see commercials for supplements on TV, it's like not intended to treat, diagnose, da, da, da. It's the same thing. That digital health application can't claim to make a difference, but where a digital therapeutic can. It's gone through rigorous clinical trials. It's gone through FDA review. So if you're not sure as a company where you are on that spectrum as you're developing a product, talk to the FDA. Talk to us. There's lots of vendors out there that can help you determine where you fall on that threshold, and the FDA is always willing to have those conversations to help figure that out and the best approach to regulating what you might want to put out there.
I think one of the questions that I want to dive into is trends. And so within technology is almost always the bleeding edge. I mean, we think of technology as advancing every industry now, and AI is kind of one of those aspects. But with slower industries, or industries that naturally have to move at a slower pace, healthcare being one of those, like you described, because of you're having real world impact on humans and human lives, you want to kind of slow down a little bit. Where does that show up between bleeding edge and pushing the boundaries of technology and what is capable versus making sure you're going slow, you're rigorously testing prior to releasing anything? Is there a delay between what is possible versus where we actually are with the healthcare technology today's?
It's particularly with GenAI. This is one of the biggest challenges I think healthcare is having in terms of technology these days. Healthcare has always been, in my view, one of the last industries to really embrace the idea of data. Technology has always been present. Like just look at the MRIs and the CAT scans and that are in use today, and the incredible things they're able to do. But they haven't truly embraced data. And until even the early 2000s, 2008, 2009 kind of thing, most didn't even have EMRs. They were still on paper. Fax is still a fairly prevalent thing in the industry, which is crazy. I was at one of the healthcare conferences in the spring, and there were still like 4 fax vendors there with very large booths. What is wrong with this picture? But yet the pace of technology and innovation is advancing faster and faster, and AI is just going to push it faster and faster. But it is powerful, and it is very capable in what it can do. So you have to be cautious. And there is this idea that, it takes, I think it's 17, 18 years for medical research to get into routine clinical practice. That's like, we can't even imagine what's going to be possible, years down the road kind of thing, let alone, next week with GenAI some of these days. But in healthcare, even today, there's a lot of good use cases for it. And it's not directly patient facing, but it's like in other industries, how can the doctors, the nurses, the healthcare professionals be more efficient?
And if it's not patient facing, does that mean that they can start adopting it or use it, or you can build for it today?
You can start using it, adopting it today, because you're not making medical decisions and relying on medical decisions. So a huge, growing area is ambient listening now. And there's been a lot of, voice dictation technologies over the years, but
ambient listening being, I am a doctor or a nurse, I'm talking with a patient and it's recording and transcribing, or?
Yes, exactly that. So think about when you go to your doctor, and very often now in the EMR, and all the doctors and the nurses, anybody using EMRs hate them. They're not designed for patient care. They're really designed around capturing information for billing. It then does give us a lot of data to work with and manipulate and do predictive analytics and some fun stuff. But someone has to type all of that in. So in some practices and stuff, they'll hire scribes, like people literally just to sit in that room and translate that, and type that information in. And so now you're losing some of that engagement where the doctor, if they don't have that scribe, they're like really focused on the computer and not so much the patient. So you do tend to lose something there. You lose that human element. So now you embed technology in the room that can just listen to the conversation and transcribes those notes and put it into the system. And even in my own personal use of GenAI, there's these surprise moments. And I've heard one anecdotal story, which was really intriguing, about that ambient listening, where the patient was describing that, they had trouble falling asleep at night, they're restless legs, and they're like, well, if I take 2 shots of whiskey before I go to bed, I feel much better. Okay, that's not a good thing to do. Drinking alcohol and 2 shots before bed you're not going to have a good sleep that night. But in this situation, the patient thought it was helpful. Now, the ambient listening and the transcription that ultimately came out of it wasn't patient said they took 2 shots of whiskey. It wasn't word for word. What was transcribed was patient self-medicates. So it made that translation into medical jargon, like what the doctor or the next person viewing it was just, is powerful. I did a webinar a couple months ago about using AI in product development, and came up with this idea of creating a digital health application about treating patients that had a fear of peanut butter getting stuck to the roof of their mouth. Like, okay, what, something strange. And GenAI.
Sure, there's a true phobia, some medical term for that.
I'm sure there is. We can ask ChatGPT. What is it? Yeah. But it came back with, really? Like, I detect a note of sarcasm. Do you really want to do this? And it just like, oh, wow. I know it's not sentient. It's not self-aware. It's not thinking. It's not reasoning or anything like that. But you can still get those types of things out of it. Even, I've been talking to it and playing with it in different things. And I mentioned, okay, help me figure out something to eat for dinner tonight. And I was like, trying to eat more vegetarian. It's healthier, but we still enjoy meat and chicken, pork. And so it comes back and it's like, based on your flexitarian lifestyle. And it's like, made that translation, didn't take exactly what I said in feedback. It made that translation into, okay, that's a flexitarian diet. So it's those types of things in the ambient listening, sort of to get back to the healthcare and the use cases. Ambient listening is huge. Generating notes, letters that you have to communicate. And it's something that the doctors, the nurses, the healthcare professionals can do very easily. They're good at it. But the GenAI systems can do it faster, more efficiently. They can pull in information from that medical record system. And it just saves your time. One of the common things that healthcare professionals find them doing is, I've heard it referred to as pajama time. So it's like you go home at the end of the day after your 12-hour shift and seeing, 5-6 patients every hour. It's very stressful. But then you have to go home and you work in that EMR and type. But if you can use the technology, you can turn that pajama time into family time. And you don't have to be doing that at night.
Do you find that there's demand? So there's kind of two aspects. Technology typically advances based on demand in some regard, right? And so it's either the engineers demand and want to use the technology, it's the consumers, the end user demands and wants kind of the better experience, better technology, whatever it is, or the users of the technology that are delivering it, in your case, doctors and medical professionals, demand that better technology. So we've talked a lot about where the nurses and the doctors get benefit from some of this emerging technology and how it's actually easier to roll out. Is there any pressure or demand for pushing that even further from that cohort, or from the consumers themselves saying, hey, I want to be able to chat with my electronic medical records. I want to be able to, have a pre-screening with the, chat GPT doc, right? Doc edition or something that knows all my medical history and all my medical data, or is it really just kind of the medical professionals that are advancing this currently?
I I would love to say that the increased use of this technology and stuff is driven by patients, but I don't have any research related to this or anything like that. But I think it's really driven more by the healthcare practitioners in trying to do more for the patients. And one of the reasons I say that is because, unfortunately, here in the America and somewhat to the rest of the world, we're not very cognizant or aware of our health. We're not very good at caring for ourselves, unfortunately. Particularly here in the U.S., it's the healthcare system is broken. It's based on being sick, not being well, and that needs to change. And it is slowly changing. We are moving from a fee based where you're sick, you get paid, to a value based. Where the doctor.
How is it changing? I'm curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in a sick based system, the doctors, hospitals, health systems are all incentivized, to care for you when you get sick, because that's how they get billed. You go to the doctor. I have a cold, I scuffed my knee. Okay, there's a billing code related to that, and that's how they get paid. It's like, I saw this patient. I did, you think of a hospital. You go to the hospital, you stay for a couple days, kind of thing. It's like, and they make all sorts of money. Um, from a patient side, a lot of that's hidden from you. You can't do price comparisons. What other industry out there can you not go to them and say, okay, I broke my finger, fix it. How much is it going to cost? They can't tell you, which is insane, quite
That's
frankly.
wild.
And there are new laws on the books that hospitals, health systems have to publish this information. It's slowly happening, but it's incredibly complicated, because you can go to the same doctor at the same hospital, and depending on your insurance that you're using or the company you work for, get different charge differently. So publishing that pricing list makes it really interesting. And because the system is not incentivized to just improve general wellness, it's the patients really aren't driven either to care about their health and wellness. And so even going back 2008, 2009, we were part of a project that was looking at personal health records, as they were just coming about. And a lot of research, and it was project run out of Vanderbilt University. And they brought a whole bunch of people to talk about this. And we had meetings with the Microsofts and the Googles of the world. And what is a personal health record? And we did a lot of research. And a lot of patients were like, yes, I want my personal health record. I want my data. I'm even willing to pay for it. But then reality strikes, and nobody wants to pay for it. Very few people are using it. It is complicated, your healthcare, so I can't blame them either. But managing all that data is really hard. So we got to turn it on its head. And so healthcare is moving from that fee-for-based sick care to value-based care, which is where doctors, health systems are incentivized on the overall health of the population. So that is slowly changing. But there's a lot of incumbent players in there, holding on to the way the world is today.
It's fascinating to kind of have that insider perspective into how the system works, how it truly works. I mean, I think the example of it's the only industry where you can't actually go and ask for a quote or a price. And it's also one of the most expensive industries. And all the cost literally shows up, 3 weeks or 6 weeks after you go and do the visit, and you have no idea what's going on, right? And it's this negotiation between the insurance companies and the healthcare companies. So it's definitely unique in that regard. Where do you think insurance specifically drives, and within the American healthcare system, but where does insurance drive these outcomes of technology in its relationship between the medical provider, insurer, and then the patient?
this is one of the other challenges in healthcare, and we face this a lot and talk a lot about this when we work with startup organizations, particularly early on, is the dynamic of who's using the software you're creating or the solution. Doesn't have to be software, but who's using it and who's paying for it. So you have a difference there too, where the insurance companies in a lot of cases are the ones that are funding the use of the technology, but they're not using it. The doctors are using it or the patient is using it. So there's another sort of disconnect between, the incentives there. Insurance companies are driving a lot of use of technology because it is about improving the health and well-being. And if you can eliminate some of this sickness from the insurance side of things, then you're reducing your costs. And so, obesity is a big driver of many chronic conditions, diabetes, heart disease. And so if you can get people to lose weight, live healthier, eat better, move more, they're going to incur less costs to the system. And so there have been various approaches to this over the years in trying to do that. But one of the things that happens in the insurance industry is people move around. So again, you look at the insurance company, it's like, do I invest thousands of dollars in this patient to improve their health, but I'm not going to get the benefit of them losing the weight and living better 5 years from now because they're not going to be covered by me anymore. So it's lots of challenges in healthcare. And now we have the GLP-1 drugs, which are literally drugs you can prescribe to patients to lose weight. They work very well, but they cost a lot of money. It's a lifetime drug. Like when you go off of it, you gain the weight back because it's changing. That GLP drug is changing how you eat, but it's not changing your behavior. So when you come off that drug, the behavior is still there that, okay, I'm going to eat that bag of chips or I'm going to have that second soda. That hasn't changed. So when you do go off them, you gain the weight back. And that, tipsy-turvy up and down weight loss, weight gain isn't good for you either. So it's lots of challenges.
The incentives problem is something that I always am fascinated by. And I think the fact that you will move, you will change jobs, and you will change insurers means that their incentives are much more short-term versus yours, which is your personal health, which is your lifetime, right? So you're working on a time horizon of 30, 60 years, whereas your insurer is working on a 2-year time horizon. And so given that misalignment of incentives, you have very different outcomes between what would be ideal for you versus what's ideal for the insurer.
Yeah. And it's also even from that, I always think that personal basis. So personally, I have a goal of living to 100 plus with a good quality of life, not just living good quality of life. I think I'm doing okay so far. But
that flexitarian diet
helps. I race triathlons, so I'm out there doing my thing, staying active. Those things help. But also to think about a time horizon of, 50 years, it's like my food choices today, impact 50 years. It's not, yes, I can have a donut today and it's not going to hurt me 50 years down the road, but it's the pattern of behavior over time that makes.
How are you able to think in that 50-year time horizon? I think it's very hard for humans, generally speaking, to think in longer and longer time horizons. So we see I'm going to have drinks today, even though I'm going to feel bad tomorrow, or I'm going to, eat my favorite food today, even though, it's bad for my diet that I'm trying to do, or I'm going to spend money today, even though I should be saving retirement for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, right? So we perpetually are pulled towards shorter reward systems versus, I think the real benefits come in the long game, thus the name of the podcast, right? Is focusing on long-term outcomes and trying to do things today that align with that long-term. So how do you personally focus on that long game and long-term outcomes?
I wish I had a magic answer for you. I don't have a magic answer for you. For me personally, um, when I got married 26 years ago, I was pushing 230 and realized and then had two girls. It was like, okay, if I'm going to be around long term, enjoy them growing up, enjoy the grandchildren, hopefully great grandchildren down the road. I needed to make changes. My wife was a huge driver. She helped too in that journey. I lost 50 pounds, and I still have kept most of that off these days. But it is challenging because even between my wife and I, she's got a lot of willpower, self-control. She'll buy the bag of potato chips and eat two potato chips. Then she's like, here you go. And I'll eat the rest. So I'm by no means perfect in my journey. And, it's like, I know I shouldn't drink alcohol. Alcohol is one of those things that, it's like, yeah, can make an impact. Does increase daily drinking, does increase, your chances of getting some cancer down the road, so I do limit my drinking, Friday and Saturday kind of thing, and not too many at one point in time. Binge drinking, having that 5 or 6 drinks in one sitting is also bad, and definitely feel it the next day. It's balancing that. You don't want to limit yourself because then that's not a good feeling. So, it's like, yeah, go ahead and have that donut. It's about more long-term behaviors and overall patterns. So yes, we try and eat that flexitarian diet, more vegetable based than, meats, and so that makes a difference. And that's what we do week to week kind of thing. But okay, this weekend passed a bakery and was like, oh, let's go in there and see what they have, and had some, nice cookies, but you're eating 1 or 2, not 20. And so there's a balance there. I enjoyed those cookies.
I bet they were delicious. If there is one piece of technology that you wish you could make or wish existed, what would it be and why?
Oh, wow. I wish I had invented GenAI, because obviously there's a lot of people out there probably wish I had done that. What's interesting about that is, even like when I went to college in the 90s, I went into college and I got a comp sci degree, and my intention was to go get a PhD in AI. That was even high school. I was lucky I had a personal computer when I was in like 7th grade in the 80s kind of thing, and was fascinated by what you could do with it. And going into college, I was like, I'm going to go get a PhD in AI. This is the future. I love science fiction. Very much embedded in that whole world. And then I got a job offer. And it was like a lot more debt, or, go and work in the world. And I did choose to go work in the world, but, I'd like to think I made somewhat of a mark and have played in the areas of AI and expert systems over the years and stuff like that. But yeah, Gen AI now is the thing I wish I had invented. The next thing I wish I would invent, that's a tough one. It's where I'm challenged still in, I'm always looking for that next project to really make an impact. As we've talked to startups and stuff like that, there are various wearables now to track information about your body. And so, I do talk to some startups and like, oh, we're going to analyze this data and show patterns. I'm like, no, you have to go, patterns are old. You need to help people make decisions and give them the advice of what to do next.
And the analysis of the data, rather than just giving you the data.
That goes beyond just pattern recognition. It's like, in my mind, I'm thinking like, what's next? What next can we do with this data? And so, yeah, the Apple Watch can track all sorts of information. There's various rings that are on the market to track all sorts of information. And they do give you nice graphs and charts and feedback around, what's happening. But then how to change and how to do better, we're still not really good at. You get general advice. So I know I need to, in general, you have to eat better. Don't eat a couple hours before you go to sleep at night. Don't drink alcohol. Exercise. Okay, so all of those things I did really well this week. And then Saturday night comes and I didn't sleep well last night. Well, why? And it's like, and I know I didn't sleep well last night. And then, I look at my statistics and like, you didn't sleep well last night. I'm like, yeah, I know that. I experienced it. But what do I do? What do I change? Why? And so it's, yeah, if there was something I could really figure out, it would be that next level, how to really make this feedback personable to the individual with actionable intelligence. There's a lot of vendors in the market that talk about actionable intelligence. And then it's like, oh, you haven't been to the doctor in a year, or you haven't had your lab results done.
It's generic and vague.
Generic. Okay.
And not
yes,
accurate.
useful. Don't get me wrong. Very useful information, particularly if you're not doing it. But I want that more personable, targeted to me level of feedback and information.
I feel like it's an interesting thing to call out because there's kind of two sides of the coin. The first is what you're describing, which is we have a lot of data, but we don't have a lot of insights as to what step, what action, what I'm supposed to do. But then on the other side, on maybe the more broad side, we all know what we're supposed to do. We have this thing called the internet. It has all the information out there of the entire collective human consciousness, basically. And we know we're supposed to sleep more, eat better, exercise, right? Spend time socially with, right? Like there's all this knowledge that we have. And yet very often we still make intentional choices and behavioral choices that go exactly against what is recommended or what we know we should do. So it's kind of the twofold thing of, one part is how do we get people to actually take action on things that maybe they feel like they don't want to do, but they know what they should be doing: drink less, eat better, whatever. And then the other side is, well, if we are living in a more data-driven world and you have this personal data alone is not helpful. It's the insights and inferences from that data that you're kind of craving.
Right. Yeah. And it's that, it is, you called it out before, is that short-term versus long-term. It's like, okay, I'm out with my buddies on the Saturday night. It's like, okay, I'll have one more drink. That's hard to say no to. You probably know, okay, I shouldn't have that one more, but you're having a good old time and it's only 11 o'clock or, whatever time it is. It's like, okay, sure, I'll have another one.
Deal with consequences tomorrow.
Yeah. So there is that dichotomy there, different, incentives. Behavior change is difficult, and and you also have to be aware of being overwhelmed by this amount of information. I mentioned racing triathlons. Early on, I did get really hardcore into the metrics. And, I'd go out for a run and be like, okay, this run I'm going to do at this pace and I'm going to run a little faster. And then, it wouldn't happen. And I'd be like, oh, I had a horrible training. And I was like, no, it was still good. So I have over the years faded away from a very metric driven training regimen. I still do monitor them kind of thing, but it wasn't healthy as to be as obsessed as I was with the metrics and things like that. I'm also not a professional athlete, so they need to be, because that's they're eking out that I need to be 1 second faster kind of thing. I don't need to be 1 second faster. So there's that balance too.
Always in balance. RJ, thanks so much for coming on the show. This was a phenomenal conversation. If people want to connect with you, learn more about what you're doing, where should they go?
Corporate website, estenda.com, estenda.com, our LinkedIn, my personal LinkedIn, or the corporate LinkedIn, always posting, always out there. Attend 4 or 5 conferences every year kind of thing. So I post when I go to those, love to meet up with people, have conversations, explore ideas. It's just fascinating what's happening in healthcare today. And I love being part of it.
Love it. Thank you, RJ.
Thank you.